Welcome to the WellCast. The world has a lot to say. We're bringing a biblical perspective to those conversations.
Welcome back to the WellCast. We are glad to be back. We've taken a little bit of a break, but I'm joined once again, by the one and only Melissa Denisi. Melissa.
Yes, welcome back.
Yeah,
Glad
we had
back.
to take a little break, but we are back and we're happy to be so. So happy that we are trying something new today.
Yeah, we are. We're going to lead out with a bang here.
Yeah, our wonderful video team here at The Well has said, let's give it a try. And we are joined via Zoom with Dr. Gerry Breshears from Portland, Oregon. Gerry, thanks for joining us.
Welcome.
Very glad to be here. See you guys in action in Fresno. I'm pastors is my calling from God. I have been on faculty at Western Seminary and here in Portland this is my 44th year.
Wow.
Almost all of my students were not born when I started teaching at Western, which is, an old man. And I get to do a lot of stuff with a lot of different people, and it's just amazing to serve the church by training leaders and mentoring them. And that's what I do. And I'm glad to be here because I've heard about the Well. Dennis is a former student, and I'm glad to be a part of this process. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah,
Yes.
Melissa, you're a professor.
That's right. That's what I told everyone. One of my former professors will be on our podcast today.
My official title is Professor of Theology. And $4.50 to get me a cup of coffee at McDonald's.
And I think we have at least one other on staff right now. And I keep asking, have you taken one of his classes yet? Because I can't wait for that first theology exam because he gets you. So
Yeah, and I'm a sort of naughty Western student. My daughter was born, and I haven't finished my Western education. So we've actually met. I've been in your basement and house for one of my trips up there. Some of my friends were staying with you in your basement, and then you taught like a Q&A symposium as a part of our thing. But I've never taken a class from you. So at some point, maybe I'll finish my seminary
you'll love
degree.
having him as a student.
I'm doing a class on prayer and providence next summer in June. Show up, and Todd Miles and I co-teach that. He's a dang Calvinist. I'm a godly Calminian, and we argue in front of all the students. It's great.
Yeah.
And we also love each other a lot.
That sounds like it's right up my alley.
Yeah,
That's my speed.
you would love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we so appreciate you being here, and when Melissa and I were talking about, hey, we want to talk with Dr. Gerry. What's he sort of working with these days? What's he doing? And the two different things that came to mind were, hey, what's going on in the American church? But first, in this podcast, we want to talk through just the theology of suffering, and so like I'm not 100% sure how to start the conversation, but what do you think?
Well, I think that can sound like a heavy topic, right? But the heart in what I hope we get to talk about today is there is a theology of suffering, and there's a hope in suffering too. So it's kind of a head to heart thing. And we know because we walk with a lot of people in our church that a lot of people are hurting. There's a lot of suffering, and no one's ever going to sit across from you and tell me or ask you, tell me a theology of suffering. But every day we're trying to figure that out. And every day we're building one, or we come to the Lord with one. So that's what I hope happens from this. So
that's one of the biggest questions in just life pastoring is why in the world I'm a godly person. I'm really trying to serve Jesus. And why is all this bad stuff happening? If there's a good God, why so much bad stuff? It's a question I run into constantly because it's so real. And it's something I've spent a lot of time with. I've done a lot of work with extreme abuse. I've done a lot of stuff with I've got one guy right now, one of my students, his little guy, fourth birthday, went to the hospital with a form of leukemia. They're 120 days into that.
Oh, wow.
And they spent almost that entire time in the hospital. The little Liam's got two older siblings who are being woefully neglected because one of his parents has to be with Liam all the time. And as we talk, They have had taken him back to the hospital, and he is degenerating. He's laying in bed, can't move, can't
Oh.
talk. And why in the world? What is about this? We prayed for his healing, and he's dying in a very, very, very excruciating, painful way. What's with this? I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's so common.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more extreme, but we run into this all the time. If God is good and if God is real, why in the world all the bad stuff in this world? And actually, the Bible has some answers for that, and that's helpful. I there, thing of this from a pastoral perspective. One of the things I find that there are two basic approaches to that. One of the approaches is Tim Keller, the Redeemer's pastor back in New York, brilliant man of God,
Mm-hmm.
superb pastor with the Lord now, died of pancreatic cancer. And he wrote a marvelous book called Walking with God in Pain and Suffering. It's an outstanding pastoral book, but the foundation of the book is suffering is a pastoral and personal problem to be answered theologically and existentially.
Hmm.
How can a good God allow this to happen, or something like that? And that's kind of an American approach. And the idea comes that things should be smooth and easy.
Right.
And when it's not smooth and easy, then we're looking for somebody to blame. We're looking for somebody to sue. And that's kind of our worldview. Something happens, we got to sue somebody. And Heller writes a brilliant book from that perspective. It's so helpful. He's basically Calvinist. And his argument basically is God has a purpose in this. There's another guy called Ajit Fernando. He's Sri Lankan. He's not American. He's had a Youth for Christ in that area of the world. He's a superb New Testament scholar. And he's also written a book, Finding Joy in Suffering. That's not the exact title, but it's close. And from his perspective, suffering is a reality. We live in a war zone. It's not surprising that we suffer. And the task is not to answer the problem. The task is to suffer with joy and faithfulness. How do we suffer well? Because suffering is a given, it's a part of this world. And those two approaches are really different how you answer the question.
Wow.
Tim Keller,
That's.
it's an existential problem to
Mm-hmm.
be answered either pastorally or theologically or both. Ajit Fernando, it's a life reality. How do I find a way to be joyful and faithful to Jesus, who also suffered?
Where
And
do
suffering
you
is normal. For the American view, comfort is normal.
Mm-hmm.
and where would you say that like influences or pushes your view of that?
I have always been more on the side of Ajit Fernando. I mean, I deal with this stuff theologically, and I've got my answers as much as you can have. But the reality is, suffering is just part of this world. Jesus came in this world, and Hebrews 5 talks about him learning obedience through suffering. The Son of God become incarnate, and suffering is a part of his world. And the thing is, how do you suffer faithfully and joyfully? And I think we need to get more of that perspective in our American context. In the 2/3 world, I mean, they just expect to suffer. That's just the way it is. How do you suffer faithfully? I think we learned our focus needs how to suffer and be joyful in Jesus and be faithful to bring good into a world that's filled with brokenness.
So how do we square that with the generation that at times was like, just put on a smile and pretend, or because on a bad day that could sound like that, where you're saying, hey, just be joyful, and you can almost weaponize that as a like, stop
Oh,
doubting God, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where
oh.
how do we get to a more robust view of joy and faithfulness than like an avoidance?
What you're talking about is pretending like I'm not suffering,
Mm-hmm.
and that is not even slightly. So, again, coming from a pastoral perspective, what I want to do with people who are facing suffering is have them learn the lesson of Psalms. So, what happens biblically, Tim Keller is the Proverbs approach. If you live wisely and well, things will go well. That's kind of the message of Proverbs. And what Ajit Fernando is doing, let's live the psalmic life. So if I look at Psalms 13, which is, and David wrote that. He also wrote Psalm 23, the Lord's my shepherd, green pastures, still waters, all that sort of thing. But Psalm 13 is, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? So we have to begin with lament. This hurts so much,
That's good.
which is the opposite of avoidance. And then my enemies will triumph over me. That's a protest. This is wrong. And that psalm ends up with, yet I will trust in your faithfulness. That's the praise. And the goal is to have all three of those at the same time. In suffering, I lament, this hurts so much. And I say it to God in the community. I protest, this is wrong. This is not from you, God. This is wrong. And I praise, God, you are so good. I want to know you better, and I want to serve you more faithfully. So I'm with the psalmic approach, if I can use that too simply. There are times when I sing Psalm 23. This is beautiful. Lord, I just enjoy laying here in the still waters and eating some nice grass and living in your house forever. It's beautiful. But other times I sing Psalm 13. I need to be able to sing both psalms depending on how things are going at the moment.
I think that's a beautiful perspective too, of you can still suffer faithfully, joyfully, and honestly. So it does not have to mean, I love that this is happening to me because now I get to know God more. It's still an honest, I don't like this. This is hard, but I can know him more.
Is there is there a differentiation between like the lament and the protest and doubt? Are those the same things, or is how do you, because a lot of times I see in pastoral work this it's either a deepening or a retraction of faith, and that these doubts kind of like grab hold of the heart of someone,
Well, I can give an example of a child right now we know suffering and really wrestling out his faith with the Lord and saying, but I'm praying and I'm asking for him to remove this and he's not. So it's not just, is he not hearing me? Is he not even there? Is this all even real? So it's led him down that path. Is that kind of what you're saying? The difference of, I don't like this versus, is this happening and you're not really there, Lord?
And that's where we assume that if we're suffering, that God is not up to the job. But that's when you look at the life of Jesus, his whole life is characterized by suffering. From his birth, he's insulted because Herod and the king and the high priest aren't there. They're deliberately not showing up. He ends up as a refugee in Egypt with all that means. He goes back to Nazareth, and the way I put it, he goes out on the playground with the boys and he gets bullied. Hey, Dad, where's your daddy, Jesus? And then he's under incredible domination from the evils of Rome. And he goes to Jerusalem, and the high priest soldiers grab him and take him in a back room and assault him. I mean, that's his life. Now, there's times of joy too, but this is God present with us to show us how to live well. And the Father is with him. But it's in a context of suffering. Suffering doesn't mean God is absent. In fact, that's a big thing with Fernando's approach. How do I find the presence of God in the midst of extreme painful suffering? And my thing is, I'm looking for the sparkles of his grace in dark places when pain shouts louder than God does. And that's for the presence of Jesus, who's present in the world through the Holy Spirit. I'm looking for the presence of God in the midst of the suffering. And so the doubt is a reality. That's part of the psalmic thing. How can I believe? Why, Psalm 73, how can I believe in you when the wicked are prospering? But we take that doubt to God with respectful question, not, you're a terrible God because you're letting this happen, sort of thing. That's the attitude we want to develop.
Yeah.
So would you say, for a summary, you would say that most Western American or just Westerners would assume that um, the absence of suffering is the good life or is what we are entitled to as people, and so then when suffering, which is seems to be inevitable in the human experience, enters in, it not only like pushes them away from God because, well, their view of God is wrapped up within their comfort or their lack of suffering. Um, and would you
Mhm.
say that the presupposition just needs to change in order to drive the heart of the person suffering to the
Yep.
Father and to walk with? So it's like, even though I am in the valley of the shadow of death, He's with me
Mhm.
in that.
Yeah. And that's, again, that's the perspective of Proverbs. If you're wise and live faithfully, things will go well. You'll be blessed. And that's the American triumphalism. We're exceptions. We do well. We bring goodness and wealth to the world. And when something goes wrong, somebody's failed and we sue them. That's our base worldview.
Mhm.
The biblical worldview is we live in a war zone, and in a war zone, it's not that God has ordained or allowed evil, it's there's a rebellion going on. It's called Satan. In this war zone, Ephesians 6 and other places like that, you get hurt in a war zone. There's things that are wrong in a war zone. That doesn't mean God is absent. It means God is using good to overcome the evil. Romans 12:21, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And primarily, that's what God is doing, because what he wants to do is take evildoers and help them become children of God. That's his bigger goal, and that's the work that he's doing, overcoming evil with good. So you make your enemy your friend instead of killing your enemy.
I love that. It gives us some work to do with people, I think, when we're talking to them through our own lives too, suffering. But I do want to know how you respond to that question theologically, pastorally, for the person who comes to you. I've got one in my phone I need to respond to this week of why. Why would God allow this or do this, or why even have that as something in the world? So I'd love to hear, because I don't think you can just answer people theologically, right? I think there's always questions under that question, but how would you respond to that why question?
The word allow in our English means give permission for. God never gives permission for evil. I mean, well, he does sometimes. He allows Job to be tormented by Satan. That's the exceptional. God maintains a world in which evildoers are present, but he's
Mm.
not giving them permission to do their evil as a norm. So that's why, I mean, when you say God allows it,
Mm-hmm.
God is giving permission for it or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the norm. I use the example of parents. Melissa, I know you're a parent. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know about you, Jordan.
Yeah,
Uh,
very similar age
and
kids.
Yeah.
yeah, so, and your kids are about the age of my grandkids, my younger grandkids. So,
Mhm.
and I'd say here's a parent who's trying to make a place where their children will thrive. But we know well that once, even in the house, they're facing difficulties. I wanted to learn how to be agents of good in a place where things go wrong. Well, why did you allow that thing to happen in the house? Why did you allow that chair to fall over and land on my foot?
Mm.
Well, I didn't allow it, but I have a house where those kinds of things happen. I could tear down the house, and that's what God's going to do in Revelation 19 is tear the whole system down. But in this system, this is the war zone analogy. And parents try to make a good life for their children, but they can't. Kids go to the playground and get bullied.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, And so that the parenting analogy, God is a little like a parent. Of course, father is key there. He's trying to help you do well in a world where you step out and get bullied. You go to work and you get mistreated by somebody else there. It's not you're allowing it, it's you don't shut the whole system down. So that's the analogy I use. And then the purpose is to do good to other people in the midst of the suffering environment. So the why question, typically I say, I really can't answer that. Why would God allow that? That's the question in scripture all the way. How long, O Lord, until you stop this? And that's a very real question. Jesus asked that question as he's in the Garden of Gethsemane. That's a very real question. And the answer is, I want you to help me overcome that evil with good. So the purpose is to be an agent of good in a war zone.
And in that process, you're transformed as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember my grandma used to always say, don't waste your suffering. Or don't waste your hurts. And I didn't really understand that until I got older and experienced some real hurts. And every person is, you are faced with these realities that you can choose to almost like, I don't know if I'd word it better than waste it, in that like woe is me, who am I, how, or, asking these things. And they're not bad questions, like you've said, but there is all suffering is fiery forge and transformative if handed over to the process you're talking about.
Yeah, it can be transformative. Depends on how we approach it. Suffering can destroy you too.
Or I've noticed it can really turn people very inward. So now life is all about how hard this is for me and what I need, and you don't know what I'm going through, and as opposed to that, outward stewardship almost is what you're saying of don't waste your suffering. You can go through things, and
there's someone you can become through that, good and bad, right? And I feel like what you're saying, I think, as it meets people, is suffering also revelatory of what the faith, is it revelatory at all of the faith of the person that enters into suffering? Is it, I feel like that's a very judgmental question in some ways, but I don't know. I've had a lot of conversations recently with people who I've just been surprised at their level of inability to deal with these things, and even their abandonment of God in the midst of it, when I felt like the faith was so strong in the process. And I don't know if that's even appropriate to talk about.
Yeah, but I think I kind of feel like what you're saying is, and this is how my husband would say it, you want a God who serves you, right? And so when things stop going your way, or some situation comes up that you don't want, well, now it's God is the one who's causing this problem or wrong, instead of who was the God that your faith, what the object of your faith, right? Was it really the God of the Bible? Or was it a God that you made up until things got hard, and then
he should fit in your boundaries, and he should run by your rules. I just keep thinking about my son. We were coming home from the Fresno State football game on Saturday. It was very late for him. He fell asleep in the car, and we get to the house, and he wakes up, and he's like, "Oh, Dad, you made me pee my pants." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay. Like, you're mad that this thing happened to you, and you want somebody to blame, I don't know if that's a direct correlation.
That's a great example.
Yeah. See, our current worldview is the critical theory. There's oppressor and oppressed. And we tend to go into I'm being oppressed, and we play the victim. Jesus is saying, no, that thing is wrong. The oppressed oppressor. You're not the victim of oppression. You may be, but he's saying you're an agent of good in the midst of oppression. And he's calling us to step up to a divine mission to bring goodness and healing into the sin-broken world. And that missional approach is, I think, is the key to this thing. You're not a victim. You're an active agent of good by the power of the Holy Spirit, following the example of Jesus. And you call people to step up and be that agent of good, which is calling to be what God asks you to do.
Gary, have you
His
experienced?
charge
Oh,
after the
sorry.
confession at Caesarea Philippi is deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me.
Mm-hmm.
And that deny yourself, deny my perspective on the world, that everything should work out well to make me happy, take up my cross. I mean, and all that means, and that's a suffering context, and follow me, bring good into the world.
Well, and that take up your cross is, I mean, what is the most good that's ever happened in the world, right? It's on the most
Mm-hmm.
horrific torture device ever known, and then the overcoming of death in the gospel, the resurrection of Jesus. I mean, if you need proof that God can do incredible things through suffering, he did it himself on the cross.
Mm-hmm.
Gary, I think these are like, I don't know, the problem of evil has been something that's, philosophical, theological, all the things for forever. But when I'm just interested, I know there's a lot of people maybe listening who are like, I may not be experiencing immense suffering, but I'm sitting with somebody who is. And can you just speak to, hey man, how do these high theological concepts boil down and meet people in the chair across from you? And how would you encourage people to take these? Because some of it's like, it's not very reassuring, I think people often want like reassurance, or my suffering is only as valuable as I see the direct outcome of good, when we don't always get an explanation.
Mm-hmm.
And how would you help people just walk in suffering with the people across from them?
Seeing the world as Job's friends. They come from a distance and they sit with him in the ashes, and they just are there. They cry with him. They sit with him for 7 days and say nothing. That's the ministry of presence.
Mm-hmm.
When they start misinterpreting scripture, because what Satan has done is he's made it look like Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28 is the blessing and cursing. If you obey, you'll be blessed. If you disobey, you'll be cursed. And the things that Satan picks to do to Job mimic Deuteronomy 28.
Hmm.
And the boils from the soles of your feet to the crown of your head is actually cut and paste from Deuteronomy 28:35. Satan is a great counterfeiter. And the guys come, and when they start using Deuteronomy 28 to tell Job how to solve his suffering, of course, it goes south really fast.
Mm-hmm.
But what they did to come and sit with, care about, listen to, share the sufferings, that, and bring the presence of Jesus into that, that's a really good thing to do. That counts for so much. And then do what you can to, of course, relieve suffering where you can. But a lot of times there's not a lot you can do. Liam, as he's suffering there in that bed in the hospital, and his parents, there's nothing I can do, but I can text a prayer to him and let him know that I'm sitting with him and hurting with him. That's the goal we have, is to sit with and then do what we can to relieve stuff. If somebody's suffering because they don't have some money, well, be generous. If somebody's suffering because they got 5 kids and no time and they're exhausted, take the kids to the park and play with them.
Oh, I like that one. Yes.
Doing good.
Melissa offers her kids.
Yeah, if anyone
Yeah.
would like to serve in that way, we'll sign our kids up. I think what you're describing in that, as the life group director for the Well, we spend a lot of time telling our leaders, when someone brings something into group, please do not try to fix or throw a Bible verse at them when we love the Bible, right? Or shut
Right.
them down with maybe this is why or whatever it may be. It just let them share what's going on. And I actually, almost every training I get to talk to leaders about this, I say, I went to seminary because I wanted to know how to care for people better. And I paid a lot of money and I came out there learning there's 3 things you can do in suffering. It's listen, pray, and follow up. those were things that I learned from Western of the best way to walk alongside people. You're not going to have every answer for everything. And we actually act like Job's friends when we think we do have the solution or the answer. So I appreciate you sharing that both as a professor
Another thing I
and
do
as a
in
pastor.
suffering, another thing I try to do in suffering is the person who's hurting so badly, if possible, get them in a space where they're doing good for somebody else.
Yeah.
That gives you you remember, this is why I'm here. Because when you're treated, I can't, I hurt so bad I can't do anything. Sometimes that's true, but a lot of times to sit in your hurt only hurts more. To say, let's go down here and serve some dinner at the rescue mission. Something like that, to become an active agent of good, even though your suffering, can really help. Remember, oh yeah, that's why I'm here.
We have a couple of we can maybe do some quick fire questions to end the podcast just around this stuff. From here, I think the first would be like, does God discipline? Does he punish? Is there retribution for sin? And is that why we suffer?
Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes we suffer because of our sin. It's really true. And God does spank his kids. He does a lot of things before he spanks you. But the idea, sometimes you're suffering because you've been a bad boy and you're being given a timeout. But
can
many
we flesh
times that's
that out?
not the answer. What?
Can you, because somebody could hear that and be like, well, my kid's dying because of my sin, right? And
that
so we don't we don't want that.
Sometimes that's the answer. Sometimes that is the answer. It often is not, but we can't say it never is because of me. Sometimes it is. That's why you get some wise friends to help you figure out, is this something I've done? It may be. Maybe my parenting style is driving my kid away because I never listened to him. Somebody needs to show, your kid is jacking around because you have been a bad dad. That may be true. I can repent and change. But kids sometimes go bad and the parents are outstanding and it's nothing they've done, it's something else. But sometimes it is my fault.
Well, I think this question is asked from the standpoint of like, let's say I have personal sin, like I cheated on my wife and never told anybody about it. And then my wife or my kid gets cancer. And then is God punishing me for my sin or punishing them for my sin? And that sort of, it's almost like they're thinking like a divine karmic cycle in some way.
Yeah. And that's where Ezekiel 18, God makes it really clear. Yeah, sometimes that happens, but mostly God has not punished somebody else because of my sin. Again, we can't give just simple answers, but I did this bad thing, therefore my kid this is happening. That connection is almost never the case.
I know when we were going through infertility and I had those questions of like my past, right? And is this why God? Oh, well, it would logically make sense that I would be punished for my past sins. And this is why this is happening to me. That made sense logically. And then I went, wait a minute. But no, the gospel is that Jesus took my punishment. There are other reasons I could be experiencing this, but my punishment for my sin was actually laid on him on the cross. And so I had to wrestle. That's theology in my real life, right? I had to wrestle that out to go, what do I really believe here about that? So, yeah.
The voice of Satan, it's your fault.
Yes.
And there's often a nub of truth to that, but Satan will take that and make it's all your fault. And that's the guilt attack. That's so it works, like you say, Melissa. It's logical.
Oh yeah,
look, I did
sense.
this, therefore that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you'd have any last.
I do want to ask one last question.
Do you have any last questions then?
You said like we're in a battlefield right now, and I think a church like ours tends to be a little bit of a frozen chosen, right? Like if C.S. Lewis says, hey, there's the dismissal of anything spiritual, and then there's the devil behind every rock or bush. And the people who think in different ways, we tend to be on the dismissal side of like, well, I mean, God's in control of everything anyways. Why would these evil spiritual beings ever interact with us? And I just finished reading some work from Dr. Michael Heiser on the divine counsel and Old Testament idea of spiritual beings. And I just been thinking through this a lot. So you talking about, hey, some of these things are in a battle zone. Can you clarify for people maybe a summary of what you would think, how should we approach this? How do we have a proactive form of battle on our end? And how does that interact with our suffering?
For somebody who comes from more Calvinistic side of the house, Tim Keller does that. But a better book yet from this, what I'm suggesting is the war zone stuff, is John Piper's Let the Nations Be Glad. That he has a chapter in that book that's one of the best I know of that talks about the spiritual battle. And the idea of war zone, he doesn't use those terminologies, but that's what he's talking about. And this is in his missions book, Let the Nations Be Glad. It's a great chapter on the fact that there's a war going on. And he's a strong Calvinist. God has a purpose for everything, but we still have responsibility for our evil choices. And there's a demonic realm, and John Piper is very much aware of that. So if somebody more Calvinistic oriented, I'd turn to John Piper. Have somebody who speaks from that perspective say, yeah, there's a war going on, and he's got a great chapter on it. Let the nations be glad.
That's good.
Well, how do those spiritual beings interact with our suffering?
They cause a lot of it. They're in here to sow chaos and disaster and disorder. And that's where a lot of the suffering comes from, is from the chaos and the disaster and the disorder. And they're causing that. That's their whole agenda, is to take what's orderly and beautiful to debauch it and defile it.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting stuff. Sounds like another podcast.
I know. Dot.
Well, do you have any final thoughts? We need to wrap this up, but do you have any maybe words of pastoral or anything that you'd like to leave people with on this topic?
Yeah, just the final thing I would say is go look at the life of Jesus. And you learn there how to live triumphantly and joyfully and lamentfully, if I can use that term, in a context and serving exactly the purpose of God. If he's not the only one who suffers, it's amazing how many people, well, Jesus suffered and died, therefore I don't have to. No, we join him in that same mission to bring forgiveness and healing to the world. That means we have to go into the hard spaces.
Oh man, why?
And then we cry out with lament and protest and praise and doubt at times, for sure, but take it to God and his people.
Yeah, but and you're good at reminding us, but the hope is found there with his presence too.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We appreciate your thoughts on that. And I hope people hear that, and at least it starts to mess with maybe some of the ways that they view the world.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they view their rights in some ways to comfortability, and maybe some of the ways that they've structured their view of suffering in life and what's normal.
Yeah. Yep. And we can try to link those books too that you recommended at the beginning, and then John Piper too, so others can dive into that. So thank you for this. Yep. Very helpful, very timely too. So
yeah. Well, we appreciate you, and we'll talk to you again next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the WellCast. As always, don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends about us. For more information about the Well Community Church, visit thewellcommunity.org.